I now recognize the Honourable the Deputy Minister of Public Works.
Chairperson, honourable members. Finally, nearly 20 years after the adoption of our universally admired Constitution, this expropriation bill has arrived to be passed here in the National Assembly. It is almost 20 years now since Clause 25, the property clause in the Bill of Rights, stated categorically, property may be expropriated for a public purpose or in the public interest only in terms of a general law of application. The bill before us here in this House is precisely that law of general application.
Honourable Deputy Minister, will you take your seat? Honourable Member, why are you rising?
Who is exactly the Deputy Minister between the Minister, the Deputy Minister,
Honourable Matiase,
and the member who appears on the Speaker's list? Who is exactly
Honourable
the Deputy
Matiase,
Minister of Public Works?
We've noted that on the screen another Deputy
Can you answer my question,
face.
Honourable Deputy?
The Honourable
House Chair.
Jeremy Cronin is the Deputy Minister of Public Works, and he will now continue in closing this debate.
Thank you, Chairperson. Although they accuse me of being a white man, I can sometimes also be a black woman. The bill before us is precisely that law of general application. It complies with the constitutional requirement that there should be no arbitrariness when the state exercises its expropriating powers. For nearly 20 years now, honourable members, despite the clear injunction from our Bill of Rights, we have failed as legislators to legislate a general law of application for cases of expropriation. Of course, government, like all democratic governments around the world, does have existing expropriating powers. Several national ministers, all 9 premiers, and all municipalities have existing...
Honourable Deputy Minister Cronin, will you take your seat? Why are you rising, Honourable Deputy Minister?
I wanted to ask whether the Deputy Minister is prepared to take a question.
Honourable Deputy Minister, are you prepared to take a question?
No, I won't take the question because I prefer to finish. If I have time afterwards, I will do so.
Okay. Order, honourable members. Order.
So, as I was saying...
Order, honourable members.
This government, including the Premier of the Western Cape, has existing expropriating powers.
Order, honourable members.
Which is why there was quite sharp differences between the Western Cape government and the DA in Parliament in regard to getting this piece of legislation through, because they've got expropriating powers, but they want to have the surety that we clearly describe in a general law of application how to proceed. There are a variety of different laws. All municipalities have expropriating powers as we speak. Several national ministers and all provinces have expropriating powers. What is lacking, and which is required by the Constitution, is a law of general application about how to proceed across the board when expropriating. The bill before this House has no ambitions to deprive any sphere of government, including the Western Cape government, of existing expropriating powers, but we seek to outline general procedures that must be followed in cases of expropriation to meet the test of constitutionality. The absence of such a general law of application has been unfair to the public, it's been unfair to investors, it's been unfair to the judiciary, which has often been called to pronounce on cases of expropriation without clear legislative guidance, and its absence has also been unfair to expropriating authorities. The property clause says the state must take reasonable legislative and other measures, I'm quoting, to foster conditions which enable citizens to gain access to land on an equitable basis. That's a must. It's not a maybe or should think about, it's an imperative must. Furthermore, the Bill of Rights asserts that for the purposes of expropriation, the public interest includes the nation's commitment to land reform and reforms to bring about equitable access to all South Africa's natural resources, not just land. No provision of the property clause, the Bill of Rights says, may impede the state from taking legislative and other measures to achieve land, water and related reform in order to redress the results of past racial discrimination. There you have it. The state is required to move decisively, not just because of the ANC's electoral mandate, but as a constitutional imperative. Now, I'm not suggesting that expropriation is only or even the primary means for achieving equitable access for all South Africans to land, to water, to electricity, to public transport, and so on. But it can be a very important means for ensuring transformative progress. Unfortunately, for over 2 decades, there has been uncertainty about expropriation. In the last parliament, the former leader of the opposition even told us that the willing seller, willing buyer formula was entrenched within the Constitution. It's a case of colonial ideas occupying even a new generation of black people. You can scrutinize the Constitution with a microscope, but you won't find a single reference to willing seller, willing buyer. Lack of legislated clarity on how to proceed constitutionally with expropriations has been extremely costly to our country. There are notorious cases of extortionate amounts of public money being paid in land restitution in some cases. In the Portfolio Committee, Eskom told us of cases in which finishing near-completed transmissions lines was delayed by 1 or 2 landowners holding out for a willing seller bonanza. We cannot allow uncertainty about expropriation for a public purpose to persist, and that is why passing this bill today is so important. In the committee's public hearings, 2 issues in particular kept cropping up: the definition of property and the question of compensation. The DA, although they've abandoned it somewhat today, in particular has consistently tried to restrict the definition of property that might be expropriated. 2 things need to be said in response. First of all, this is a law of general application. In many other acts dealing with specific sectors and ministers, property that might be expropriated is defined in various ways. You can have a look at the National Forest Act of 1998, for instance, or the Water Services Act of 1997, which describe the specific kinds of property that a Minister for Water and Sanitation might expropriate, to take that example. But this bill, here, we are dealing with a law, again, of general application. But secondly, as the Honourable Madlopo has said, we were guided in our approach in approaching what we meant by property for expropriation by the judgment of the Constitutional Court in the FNB versus SARS case. In its judgment, the Constitutional Court said, and I quote, "It is practically impossible to furnish and judicially unwise to attempt a comprehensive definition of property for purposes of Section 25 of the Property Clause." What about compensation? The DA tried to make market value the overriding criterion determining compensation. This is against both the spirit and the letter of the Bill of Rights. It is wrong, secondly, to imagine that it's only wealthy property owners who might be expropriated. A just and equitable compensation for an evicted poor community might require compensation well above market value, in the case of building a dam, for instance. And 3, when the Bill of Rights speaks of just and equitable compensation, it is not just thinking about individuals affected by expropriation. Money paid in compensation is not government money, it's public money. And expropriating authorities have a responsibility to ensure that in the public interest, extortionate compensation is not extracted by individuals. In short, honourable members and chairperson, the constitutional pretenders who claim to have fundamental problems with this bill, in fact don't have problems with the bill as such. They have problems with the actual 1996 constitution of this democratic South Africa.